So sometimes when you watch anime, sometimes you have to watch something that's grounded. A lot of times when you're trying to introduce new people in the anime, it's kind of hard to pick a show, that is, or a movie or something that can, resonate with somebody that will make them want to watch more anime. So usually I would go with something grounded. Something, not like the bombastic action of Attack on Titan or the crazy characters from Hero Aka or the crazy like storytelling of something like Steins Gate. Something more grounded in reality. I think this would be something like that. In this corner of the world. So this movie is it's a pretty interesting movie. It was like a crowd-funded movie that kind of blew up and became this big thing. So much so that it actually got a Western release, which is surprising because this movie's not made by like a big name movie maker. This is not like a Miyazaki or like the guy who did Your Name or anything like that. This is a regular. It's not a regular dude, but he's not a big name Japanese movie maker. So it's weird that it would get a Western release, But I'm kind of glad it did. In This Corner of the World follows a girl by the name of Suzu Hojo, who is a young girl who basically has her childhood story and much of her adult story told during World War II era Imperial Japan. So you already know where this is gonna go, right? So she is from Hiroshima and she moves to a town by the name of Kude, I believe, to be with her husband's new family. And it actually is a slice of life. The war does play a big role in the story, but you don't really get to see fighting or anything crazy like that. It's a slice of life about a young girl trying to live in war, in the greatest war ever. And the world building they do, going into businesses that were existing in the area, the art design is actually really, really interesting. It's a pro and a con though, which I'm going to get into a little bit later. But the art design actually uses elements of real life. That there's a real life building, in Hiroshima that they actually show in this anime near the end. And it's still there to this day in actual Hiroshima in Japan, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the art design also borrows heavily from the manga, because this was based off of a manga, and that's, like I said before, it's kind of a pro and a con, because while it makes for a really nice kind of grounded art style, Suzu's character design is kind of weird, and it kind of reveals some other problems with the show that I'm going to get into a little bit later. But her character design of a small woman kind of makes it hard to see how old she is. And some shots, you can tell that she's definitely in her her late teens, like 18, 19 years old. Some shots, not so much. I actually watched this, strangely enough, with my grandmother because, the main TV in the house is in the front room and she wouldn't leave. So I watched it with my grandmother, who is kind of an old nerd. She actually got me into Star Trek and Star Wars many moons ago. So yeah, interesting stuff. She actually watched this with me, which is why I was kind of like, this is a pretty interesting gateway anime for people. There are some stumbling blocks to that, but it's really interesting though. But the art design for her, it makes it hard to see, is she a child or is she not? But the art style as a whole looks great. Like, the backgrounds look incredible. Like, just sitting there looking at you can, like, when somebody is sitting there just looking at stuff around them, it's actually really good. Now the soundtrack in the movie, it actually kind of fits. It's kind of easygoing, nice. That's actually pretty cool. The storytelling is where this movie really shines. Now, of course, it is a slice of life story, so the story is a bit slow, but beyond that, the storytelling and the world building on this show is really good. Like, one thing that this show does is it shows you a different perspective of World War II, or war in general. Because one thing a lot of people don't really realize about war, specifically World War II, because it's so good versus evil, is that under, you know, the Allies versus the evil Axis, over here, like, yeah, most of the heads of state are the people who are pushing this war, and they're clashing. It's a clash of, you know, leaders and ideologies. But under that, there are just people who are just living life. Like, they're just going with the flow. Like, of course, there are a lot of people who have political beliefs and things like that. But under all the, you know, the rhetoric and the political speeches and all that stuff, there are just people just living everyday life. And this is something that it shows you, and it uses that to tell the story, which is really interesting. I mean, you know, they could have gone into a whole, you know, villainizing America, which they actually don't do. They could have gone into, you know, showing the dangers of nuclear technology, which they show that, but they don't really emphasize that. They go more into emphasizing the dangers and the horribleness of war than anything, which I think is actually a good way to go with this, because it's kind of respectful to everybody involved. Even though in the end there is some pretty interesting developments that come with her character because of the war. And here's probably one of the biggest things I have against this movie. And that's the third half, like the third of the movie. Takes a kind of tonal shift from like regular slice of life to like, bam, nope. It's drama now. Sadness abounds. That's pretty much what happens near like the third portion of this movie. And it's like, okay, y'all kicked that off with a bang. And this is even before some of the other more traumatic stuff happens. And I thought that shift was a bit much. You know, because they went from just regular like life drama to almost like super drama, like melodrama almost. It was like, wow, okay, y'all really put it on that time, you know. That is kind of a con, but in a story like this, you do expect that type of emotional drama to try to bring that out, and they really try to bring the feels out of you. But yeah, this movie, weighing all the options, pros and the cons, I have to give it a C. Because that last third, I was like, really? And then the ending was kind of like, it was good, but it was bad. In a way, it was perfect, but it didn't kind of set right. I have to give it a C. It was almost a B. Like, I was literally like, when I wrote this, it was a B. And in my brain, like, while I'm doing it, I'm like, no, that ending just didn't set right. But that's about it for this. Like, comment, subscribe, and keep it real.